This video is brought to you by Aura. For the first time ever, I wanted to challenge myself to watch every Oscar nominee. In the past, I've come close, but there's always been a few documentaries or short films or VFX nominees that I never got around to. This time I went 100%. Some people make a big deal over watching all the Best Picture nominees. That's baby shit. No, I watched every single thing nominated for an Oscar this year. And that said, I want to recap and rank all 53 Oscar-nominated films so that you guys know which ones are worth your time. But because so many of these are in my top 10 of 2023, I don't want to just recreate that video. So to spice things up, instead of going worst to best, I'll be doing the opposite, starting with my favorites so that we can all slowly descend into the trenches together. Because get this, sometimes the Oscars make bad decisions. And in the process, I'll be picking my own winners for each category so that you guys know what I would have voted for if I should pick the Oscars. But before we get into all that, I want to thank this week's sponsor, Aura. When I Google myself, it's uncomfortable. I learned that I'm the second most famous Karsten, which is devastating, which is uncomfortable. But what's more uncomfortable is that I, like a lot of you, have a lot of personal information that's easily accessible on the internet. You see, data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. But that's why I love Aura. It shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. But it also protects me from hackers who could use this info to access my social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats I can't see. I get features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without having to download a bunch of different apps. Not only is it easy to set up, but I also get everything at one affordable price. That's the thing. You may already have one or two of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and then leaving the back door wide open. Shut that door. Aura is always on, doing the hard work of keeping me safe so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy, and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Karsten to start your 2-week free trial, also linked below in the description. Nominated for only a single award, Best Original Screenplay, May December was and still is my favorite movie of 2023. It's about an actress who comes to town to study another woman in preparation to play her in a movie. Things get sticky when she learns more about the woman's already controversial past. It deserved a nomination for almost every other category in my opinion, but moving on. That said, it's my personal pick for Best Original Screenplay. I can't say I'm too surprised at its snubs, as the film does poke fun at how actors prepare for roles, the ethics of that work, and examines it in a way that maybe certain Academy members just didn't understand. So yeah, I get it. It's one of those films that is just too damn cool for the Oscars. It's funny, the exact same outcome happened to First Reformed in 2019, only getting a screenplay nomination, which was my favorite nominated film that year. Look at that. I've talked about this film a lot in a number of videos, so for now I'll just say if you haven't checked this one out, please do. It'll make you feel so many things. Poor Things is the second most nominated film this year, up for Best Picture, Director, Actress, Supporting Actor, Adapted Screenplay, Cinematography, Costume, Hair and Makeup, Production Design, Score, and editing. It's about a woman who sets out to discover the world after being brought back to life. As far as what I'd pick for its wins, I think it easily deserves Best Cinematography, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Costume Design, as well as Best Production Design. It's a close one for all of these categories. It's really between this and Barbie for production design, this and Oppenheimer for cinematography, but I really think Poor Things is such a massive achievement and looks and sounds like nothing I've ever seen before. I mean, really, when I look back at the year, this is one of the most technically impressive films. It's breathtaking to look at. Nothing is as original as this. This is to me one of Yorgos' most ambitious films, both in scale and in story. For being typically cynical, this is a very uplifting and in a lot of ways liberating film. The story here matches its vibrant and surreal style perfectly. It feels like even the filmmaker is challenged with this film. He's going against what he typically does and makes something kind of hopeful, but still maintains that strange, surreal style of his. There's just too much to love about this movie. I hope it takes all these awards, and I can see this one being looked at as one of the year's masterpieces. Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon is up for Best Picture, Director, Actress, Supporting Actor, Original Song, Score, Editing, Cinematography, Production Design, and Costume Design. And it tells the story of the tragic Osage murders and a romance at the heart of it all. As far as where I'd vote for it, I think Lily Gladstone totally deserves to win for Best Actress, and personally, I would go Scorsese for Best Director. That first one's maybe not that controversial, but Scorsese, let me explain. I think this is one of his most ambitiously directed films, and that's saying a lot when you look at his career. It's bold, it's risky, he tells a thematically dense story in a way that makes it look easy, it's riveting, it's the kind of movie only a master of his craft could pull off. As I've mentioned before, it's the kind of movie that's made me look back at other films in his career in a different way. I think even he is reflecting on his own work through this film. It's just one of the greatest achievements of his career that cements him as arguably the greatest of all time, and I say that as if that wasn't already the case before this. And as far as Lily Gladstone goes, as much as I love Emma Stone in Poor Things, I think what Gladstone does here is a lot subtler and a lot more powerful. I think she dominates the screen in this movie in a way I don't think any other actor this year did. The most nominated film of the year, Oppenheimer, is up for Best Picture, Actor, Supporting Actress, Adapted Screenplay, Directing, Cinematography, Score, Sound, Production Design, Costume Design, Makeup and Hair, and Editing. Basically, it was nominated for nearly everything it could have been nominated for, except VFX, which, yeah, I guess it doesn't need that. The film tells the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer, his involvement in the atomic bomb, and everything that happened before and after. As far as what I'd pick, I think it does deserve Best Editing, Best Score, Best Supporting Actor, and I'll say it, Best Picture. But Karsten, it's number 4 on the list. How is it getting Best Picture? Sure, while I might like Flower Moon and Poor Things just a bit more, I think Oppenheimer is incredibly deserving of the big award. Nolan deserves it at this point, right? Oppenheimer to me represents the best that film has to offer, taking pages of dialogue and translating them onto the screen in a riveting way. The construction of this film, like I've mentioned before, is so alive yet controlled. It sinks its way into your brain, which makes it one of Nolan's best. It makes it easier than ever for the viewer to feel what he's showing you rather than trying to piece together a puzzle. I feel like so often he's had to tell people how to watch his movies, but with Oppenheimer, you can't help but feel wrapped up in it. There's no explanation needed here. And on top of all that, it's in my eyes the movie of the year. The amount of good this did for the film industry, the moment that was Barbenheimer, it just makes me really happy, if as corny as that sounds. And for all those reasons and tons more, I think this fully deserves Best Picture. The Zone of Interest is up for Best Picture, Director, Adapted Screenplay, International Film, and Sound. And I'm giving it Best International, as well as Best Sound. And without spoiling it, it tells the story of a family. Yeah, the Zone of Interest raking in this many nominations is legitimately one of the most respectable things I've seen the Oscars do since I've started paying attention to them, because not only is it one of the most powerful and upsetting films of the year, but it goes about it in a pretty experimental and restrictive way, which goes against everything the Academy usually goes for. So it goes without saying that, yeah, I'd love to see this take the Sound Award, as I think it uses that tool in an unconventional yet disturbing way, and obviously I would love to see it get Best International. The Boy and the Heron is up for just one award, Best Animated Feature, which I'm obviously picking it for. It should be up for Best Score, but I will move on. It's the story of a boy who, while coping with the loss of his mother, meets a talking heron. Maybe picking this over Spider-Verse is a tad controversial. Yeah, Spider-Verse is louder and more extreme with its animation, but regardless of how you feel about the script, Boy and the Heron feels like Miyazaki at the top of his game with some of these ideas. The places that this film takes you to feel limitless. There's an attention to how every object in the film moves. The possibilities are endless and never predictable. For an animated film in this day and age to surprise me and give me this feeling of childlike wonder is pretty impressive. It may not be as showy, but at the same time, the work that goes into animating some of those later scenes with the parakeets is pretty insane when you think about it. There's so much detail there. Maybe it's just because everybody's so used to how great Miyazaki is, but seriously, take a step back and just appreciate how well animated this film is. The film offers a sort of wisdom you could only get from someone as iconic as Miyazaki. It's reflective and vulnerable in a way that did move me quite a bit. For all those reasons, I have to pick it. It's my favorite animated feature of the year. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is up for Best Live Action Short and is the only thing Wes Anderson is nominated for this year, which I'm not going to think too much about or else I'll get red in the face.
I don't know why nobody else liked it.
It's a story about Henry Sugar and what happens when he discovers another story about a man who could see without his eyes. And yes, as lame as it is to pick the A-list director, even after seeing the rest of the nominees, I'm still picking this. Not only because it would be absolutely fantastic to see Wes win a goddamn Oscar, but I also think this is a great film to win for. I've seen Henry Sugar 3 times now, and each time I discover so many new details in the production design, performances, direction, sound, etc. It's almost like unfair how good this is. It's one of his most finely tuned pieces of work that also happens to have a lovely story. The amount he's able to do with just a short film is incredible. Even if you're not a big Wes Anderson fan, even if he might annoy you every now and then, I feel like you can't deny just how impressively constructed this short is. I could watch it every day for the rest of my life. Anatomy of a Fall is up for Best Picture, Director, Actress, Original Screenplay, and Editing. It's about a woman who is accused of killing her husband when he falls out of their window to his death. And I'm realizing now that unfortunately, I don't think I'd actually vote for it in any category. If it weren't for May December, it would have Screenplay locked in for me. But that said, I really love this movie. It likely will win Best Original Screenplay, and I won't be upset at all with that because it's just an incredible screenplay. This is a riveting courtroom drama that never feels absurd or too much like a movie. It feels like you're watching a documentary, which speaks to how great every single performance is, even the dog. But I also think it feels so real because of how complicated its characters are. There's nothing black and white about this film. And on top of that, I think there is some real skill to how simple the setup is. There's not a lot to the surface of this film, yet there's so much to unpack about every side of it, every detail. And to me, those are always the most engrossing kinds of films. They're the kind that I can't stop thinking about days after I see them. Perfect Days is nominated for Best International Feature. It's directed by legendary filmmaker Wim Wenders, and it tells the story of a toilet cleaner in Tokyo. Despite Zone of Interest being my pick over this, I still have a lot of love for this one, and I'm just happy to see it here. It's equally as shocking to see it nominated for different reasons than Zone of Interest, because see, Perfect Days reminds me of Patterson in that in a lot of ways it's a minimalist film that embraces the mundane, the routine, and that's the kind of stuff I really love. Finding a way to make tiny things like that beautiful and cinematic, or I should say displaying why it already is beautiful, is what makes these films so touching to me, because it makes me look at my own life and my own routine and really appreciate it and see the beauty in it. I'm glad to see something this subtle at the Oscars. I know the actor category was already pretty busy and there was virtually no chance this would have happened, but I would have loved to see Koji Yakusho get a nomination for his performance, as it is one of the most subtly powerful performances of the year. Nominated for just 2 awards, Past Lives is up for Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. It tells the story of 2 people who were separated early in life and what happens when they reunite years later, contemplating what could have been. As you may know, I got love for Past Lives. It's an achingly romantic movie that will also break your heart. It's one of the strongest debuts of the year, and I've always had a hard time talking about this one. It's hard to put into words why this film feels so tender. A lot of it has to do with how universal it feels. It's one of those where you're like, is the movie talking directly to me right now? Has the filmmaker been spying on my life? Obviously, no. It just goes to show how well Celine Song understands people. I guess it's just rare to see someone put so much honesty and vulnerability into a romance. I'm glad it has gone as far as it has. Celine Song is going to have one hell of a career. The easiest movie to recommend at the Oscars, The Holdovers, is up for Best Picture, Original Screenplay, Actor, Supporting Actress, and Editing. It's about 3 people who get left behind at a prep school over winter break and the unlikely bond that they form. And I'm voting for it in both acting categories. Paul Giamatti for Best Actor and Da'Vine Joy Randolph for Best Supporting Actress. Yeah, it's easy to call The Holdovers just a cozy film, that its likability is there because of how easygoing it is, but I think the heart of it lies in the performances, specifically Giamatti's and Randolph's. With Da'Vine Joy Randolph, I feel like I've talked about her enough. We know she's great, and it's probably the most obvious award of the night, but I want to put down my case for Giamatti over Murphy right now. Not only would it be great to see Giamatti get the Oscar, but I also think he's got nothing to hide behind. His performance carries most of the film. Whereas with Cillian, who also does an incredible job, don't get me wrong, he has the extremity of Nolan's presentation to lift up an already amazing performance. There's the editing, the score, the cinematography, there's so much working in his favor. Giamatti doesn't have any of that. He's the guy carrying the entire thing. He's basically creating the tone. His character, like the film itself, is cold but sometimes cozy, deeply upsetting but sometimes enjoyable to be around. I just think he makes the film what it is, and it's a damn good film. Io Capitano is up for Best International Feature, and it's about a 16-year-old Senegalese teenager and his cousin making the treacherous journey from Dakar to Italy. A movie with this much suspense, with stakes this intense, is always going to be a riveting experience. It's kind of one of the most gripping road trip movies out there, but what takes it a step above is the central performance from Seydou Sarr and his chemistry with Mustafa Fall. There's so much heart at the center of this. I believe every feeling being felt on screen. The filmmaking is way more concerned with performance than trying to sell the intensity of the situation, which may seem backwards for what this aims to achieve, but in doing so, by looking inward, you actually understand the circumstances a lot better. It's one of those where I couldn't believe I wasn't watching a documentary. All of it is so devastatingly real and never overly dramatic, yet there are pops of fantasy and surrealism in here that work really well in the context of their scenes. I was just engrossed by this, and I'm thrilled to see it nominated. Barbie is a small indie darling directed by Greta Gerwig, and it's up for Best Picture, Adapted Screenplay, Supporting Actor, Supporting Actress, Costume Design, Production Design, and 2 original songs. It's a movie about Barbie. We know what this movie is. And I am definitely voting for What Was I Made For in the song category. I think that song is incredible and does a lot of heavy lifting for the film's finale. I also think it's one of Billie Eilish's best written songs. Maybe that's controversial to say. I just really love it. I really liked Barbie. I'm glad to see it get this kind of love. I'm not one of those people who thinks it's overhyped. I think it deserves this. I think the film did exactly what it set out to do, and I can't imagine the impact this must have had on a younger generation. It's not the best thing in the world. It's not even the best Greta Gerwig Gerwig movie, but for being a Barbie movie that Mattel was directly involved in, the film is surprisingly hilarious and bold. I really wanted to give this Best Production Design, but I think What Poor Things does is just a tad bit crazier. Across the Spider-Verse is up for Best Animated Feature, and it's the sequel to the critically acclaimed Into the Spider-Verse, and yeah, I'm sticking with Boy and the Heron. At the end of the day though, actually just like Boy and the Heron, this should have been up for Best Score. The score to this film plays a massive part in giving it the rhythm that it has. It keeps the film alive and complements the animation perfectly. Not a lot of movies this year did that, where they looked at the images and made a sound that sounded the way it looked. You know what I mean? But back to the movie. I'm glad that the follow-up to the first film wasn't a flop. They only got better at what they did and proved that nobody is on the same level with this style of animation. Similar to Wes Anderson in the short category, I feel like it's unfair how good the animation is here, but I do think Boy and the Heron's a better movie. But yeah, I love these movies and I can't wait for the next one. Godzilla Minus One is up for Best VFX, and it's my pick for Best VFX. It tells the story of a large monster. Why am I describing Godzilla? Yeah, I love this movie quite a bit, and speaking specifically about the VFX, it's actually the first time in a while where I was watching a movie and was amazed at the visual effects. It's been a while since a film shocked me in that way. Not only do you feel the scale of Godzilla, but there's also so much personality to his face. The character design is incredible. It just helps this monster feel more believable. Like, filmmakers have followed Jaws so hard that it's gone full circle and ruined a lot of monster movies because people think they need to hide the monster as much as possible. But I feel like because of that, all these monsters are just interchangeable these days, being these giant, slimy, dark blobs. But in Godzilla, there's a level of confidence with the VFX where they show you the whole thing and they hold on it. You get to take in his face, and in doing so, you get the kind of awe-inspiring film-going experience that feels like a rarity these days. And character design aside, I think the VFX of the destruction is almost too believable, to a point where it is devastating to watch. Again, I haven't been shocked by visual effects in a while, and this film certainly shocked me. Four Daughters is up for Best Documentary Feature, and guess what? That's my pick for Best Documentary Feature. It tells the story of a Tunisian woman and her daughters, two of whom were radicalized by Islamic extremists, and the documentary focuses on two actors who come in to play those daughters and reenact crucial moments from their upbringing as a means of better understanding and processing their traumatic past. The documentary nominees this year were really upsetting, I'm not gonna lie, and Four Daughters is no exception, but it also tells its story in the most interesting and weirdly optimistic ways. I like the other nominees, but I will say they each take a very straightforward approach to their filmmaking, whereas Four Daughters has a challenging and in some ways experimental approach. The concept in itself is strange and unlike anything I've ever seen before. It's fascinating to watch it unfold, and it proves itself to be pretty effective in the end. It's an insightful look into trauma and coping with that trauma. It's just one of those docs that reminds you there are a lot of ways to make a movie. Invincible is up for Best Live Action Short, and this one has really grown on me with time. It's about the 48 hours before a 14-year-old boy's death, and of all the shorts, I think this had the best lead performance. It was so good I started to wonder if a short film performance has ever been nominated for Best Actor, as I could see this at least being in the running if that was allowed. It's beautifully shot, there's a real tenderness to the film that both invites you in, but makes you feel uncomfortably close at times. It is a little long, but you don't really feel that length, which is rare for a short film. I just really enjoyed this, and if you're a fan of Xavier Dolan's Mommy, you'll dig this one too. American Fiction is up for Best Picture, Adapted Screenplay, Actor, Supporting Actor, and somehow Score, which I don't mean to sound like a dig. I love the jazzy score of this film. I just really did not expect it to get nominated, and to be honest, I would have taken Spider-Verse or Boy and the Heron over this score. The film tells the story of a struggling actor who, out of frustration, writes a book under a pen name that leans into black stereotypes. Things get weird when that book unintentionally becomes a hit and changes his life. American Fiction with time has grown on me. The more people see it, and with more awards attention, the more hate is going to come its way, because when you look at it next to the rest of the Best Picture nominees this year, it does appear like unremarkable Oscar bait, and the one critique I can really get on board with is that it is sort of tailored to the exact audience it's making fun of, which sure, but I think it's aware of that, and I can't speak to the criticisms that it's a poor adaptation of the book because I haven't read the book, but I will say it's rare to see a film these days tackling subjects like this that feels refreshing. The film is extremely heartfelt. Sterling K. Brown definitely deserves that nomination for how much he's able to bring to this film, and it's really funny. I enjoy a laugh. It's not as artfully presented as a lot of the Best Picture nominees here, and in the grand scheme of things, it probably packs the least punch when I see it next to these others, but I still think it's a fascinating film that captures the current moment in a funny and heartfelt way. Nai and Wai Po is up for Best Documentary Short, and it's my pick for the award by a long shot. It's about the director's two grandmothers, one from each side inside of his family and the bond that they share. It's my favorite kind of short in that it's simple and in doing so is very human. I really felt like I knew these sweet old ladies by the end of the short, and I could understand why they have this sort of bond. And it never shoves any of it down your throat. It focuses on the sweet, inconsequential moments that make these people who they are. It's a special little short film and a lovely tribute to these people. Robot Dreams is one of the biggest surprises at the Oscars, sneaking its way into Best Animated Feature, and it's basically animated past lives, telling the story of a dog and a robot who are split up way too early in their friendship and the paths that each of their lives go down. I love animated features that succeed without dialogue. Think Shaun the Sheep, because it really pushes the filmmakers to make what's on screen as engaging as possible. And Robot Dreams doesn't have a lot of over-the-top slapstick or crazy action setups. The animation itself isn't even that crazy. Really, this succeeds in highlighting the simple pleasures of being with yourself. It expands on the themes touched on in past lives that not even past lives fully explored, like who you are without someone, who you are completely alone. It never says anything ridiculously profound, and sure, I wish it pushed itself a bit more here and there, especially with the animation, but this was so lovely, and I can imagine on the right day that this would feel like a tight hug. Night of Fortune is up for Best Live Action Short, and I really enjoyed this short. It's about a man who goes to a chapel to see his deceased wife, but can't bring himself to look at her. Not only is it beautifully shot, making the most of a pretty bleak and simple setting, but the film is also a really interesting look at grief. There's tons of dark humor that, with the exception of Henry Sugar, felt super necessary for this year's very serious shorts block, but it's the more somber moments in here that will stick with you. The two leads in this film actually kind of reminded me of family members that I have, which is to say, this just understands the shield that older men were raised to put up, and I found that really touching, and I can't wait to see what this director does next. 95 Senses is up for Best Animated Short, and it might just be my pick. It's a short about a guy recounting his life through each of his senses, and yeah, when this started, I really didn't expect it to resonate with me the way that it did by the end. I think when you look at it next to the other nominees, it's not nearly as inventive with its animation, but the story here is incredibly told. I don't want to give it away because it kind of comes out of nowhere in the film. It makes you think about your life in this what could have been way. I thought it really pulled that off. Add in some Tim Blake Nelson voice acting and you have yourself a damn good short film. Napoleon, shockingly, is here. I say shockingly because I thought the rest of the world didn't like it. I personally am very happy it made the cut. And it's a film about, well, Napoleon and about how he rose to power, told primarily through his relationship with Josephine. It's up for Best Costume, Best Production Design, and Best VFX. And I would definitely not pick it for any of these. As much as I like Napoleon, it feels very behind the curve compared to everything else this year, which isn't a bad thing, but it's certainly not the most exciting movie out there for that reason. I still think it's really well made, and it certainly thrilled me. There is a small part of me that thinks this will be one of the biggest upsets of the night, and the Academy will vote for it in one of these categories. 20 Days in Mariupol is up for Best Documentary Feature, and boy, is this an intense one. The title is pretty self-explanatory. The film documents the 20 days in Mariupol as Russia began invading the city, and it does not shy away at all. They show about as much as they possibly can. It's a really tough watch because of this, but by showing these horrific images, the film becomes one of the bravest and most honest documentaries I've seen in recent years. The thing that holds it back is both the fact that it goes about this in a very straightforward way. Its mission is to inform you of these atrocities, so it doesn't really do much with its filmmaking, but the one thing it does do creatively is add this narration that, in my opinion, brings down certain moments. It is the only time the film feels like it makes a super active choice, and it happens to not work that well for me. But all that aside, I do think it's one of the most powerful things I watched this year. It's oh man, is it upsetting. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is up for Best Sound and Best VFX. It's about Ethan Hunt and his crew stopping a weapon from destroying the world. I enjoyed Dead Reckoning quite a bit, and it's nice to see a Mission Impossible film get recognized in some way. I was amazed to see that this is the first time a Mission Impossible movie has ever been nominated at the Oscars. That said, it's certainly crazy to see this get 2 nominations when Fallout never got anything. That feels wrong. But Dead Reckoning is certainly a fun time, and the sound and VFX in that final scene are worthy of recognition. It was a truly nail-biting experience. Other than that, I don't have a ton to say about this movie, and I never have. It's just fun. It's fun, and it gets the job done. The Creator is also up for Best VFX. It's about a world where humans are in a war against artificial intelligence, and a guy who embarks on a mission to destroy the Creator, the being who created AI. And god damn it, if it weren't for Godzilla, this would definitely be my pick for Best VFX. No, it might not be the best film as a whole, but damn are the visual effects in this such a beauty to look at. I love the world world building and the character design here, you can tell there's so much love and care put into it. It's like watching a dream come to life. And I'll come out and say that it was well directed. It's just the screenplay that suffers. It's hard to care about the central characters of the film who feel severely underwritten and forgettable, which is just a reminder that great movies, no matter the genre, start with an understanding of character, which I wish this had. The Last Repair Shop is up for Best Documentary Short, and it tells the story of a warehouse in LA that repairs musical instruments for students. Undoubtedly the most polished of the documentary shorts, the film is full of warmth and whimsy. It really brings out the special feel of the workshop and the importance of what they're doing. To me, what's really stuck most about this short is the craft, not only in its filmmaking, but also in what the subjects of the documentary do. I think it does a really great job at capturing the magic of it. To be honest, for how long this is, it hasn't really stuck with me. In fact, if the audio sounds weird right now, it's because I actually forgot to talk about it the first time I recorded the video. But I still think it's a really amazing short and is definitely worth your time. The Teacher's Lounge is up for Best International Feature. It's about a teacher who accuses someone of theft and how that accusation spirals out of control. And boy, does it spiral out of control, almost to a point of coming off a bit ridiculous. But it works. I liked this movie. The film toes a fine line of exploring modern themes like accusal and mob mentality without ever coming off preachy or like it's trying to come off smarter than the audience. But at the same time, it never does reach a point of ever saying anything necessarily profound, which is fine. Nobody needs that all the time. Sometimes we just want to watch a stressful experience to feel some sort of catharsis. Sometimes we just need to go, it really is like that, and that's what this film delivers. Nothing more, nothing less. And that said, while I did enjoy this, I have not thought about it at all since seeing it. Red, White, and Blue is up for Best Live Action Short, and it tells the story of a mother who needs to make an urgent trip to Illinois from Arkansas, I think it's Arkansas, for an abortion. I've been told by a lot of people in the comments that saying a movie has a twist is a spoiler in itself, even when you don't say what that twist is. Which is to say, I went into this knowing there was a twist, and I was kind of looking for it the entire time, but it still floored me. I also think it's the way this film plays with your assumptions and how you read the film that makes it kind of brilliant. I'm almost glad I knew there was a twist because it really kept me on edge. There's nothing too groundbreaking here with the cinematography. I do think aspect ratio changes are usually a little gimmicky. This is not an exception. I don't think this needed to go 4:3 in the end. But the screenplay for this is, like I said, brilliant, and I found the film surprisingly thought-provoking for such a heavily discussed topic. To Kill a Tiger, one of the biggest surprises of the nominees, is up for Best Documentary Feature. It's about a father who sets out to bring justice to his 13-year-old daughter who went through a brutally traumatic event. I hadn't heard a peep about this film before it was nominated, but having seen it, I am definitely happy to see it in the running. This is a fresh and bold take on the subject matter. It's easy to say things have gotten better, when in many parts of the world, situations like this are looked at in such dangerously dated ways. And the film does an incredible job at patiently challenging these views and examining how to make change without causing more aggression. It takes a low-key approach, which is why it's pretty great seeing something like this sneak its way into a nomination, and you can understand why it takes this approach, as the presence of even a small camera crew creates a lot of tension in the film. The only issue with that is it does make me wonder how much further the film could have gone. It could have been something even more special than what it is, but I still really enjoyed this, and I'm glad to see it nominated. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is up for Best VFX. This is the third installment in the Guardians of the Galaxy series. It focuses mostly on saving Rocket Raccoon, and while it's easy to hate on Marvel these days, I think this film totally deserves this nomination, and perhaps a few more, like makeup. I enjoyed Volume 3, and it's easy to forget when looking out at all the muddy, disgusting-looking CGI dumpster fires that superhero films can in fact look great sometimes. Not to say Guardians 3 doesn't have its missteps, but the VFX here are mostly impressive. What really sold me on this was hearing the people behind the VFX talk about the process of putting together the iconic No Sleep Till Brooklyn scene. A great scene on its own, but an even greater one knowing what went into pulling it off. Looking back at it, I think this is really the best Marvel film we've had in a very long time, by a long shot. There's a reason every comic book film tried to be this, because not only does it blend comedy and action seamlessly, but it makes it look easy. And having seen so many poor attempts, I've come to really appreciate what James Gunn is able to do with these films, this one being no exception. El Conde is up for Best Cinematography, Pablo Larraín's second film in a row to land in this category, and it's a horror comedy biopic fantasy thing about Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet met and what he would be like as a vampire that cannot die. An absolutely fascinating premise that hooked me almost immediately, El Conde is the kind of dark comedy that I love to eat up. And I'm glad that it secured a cinematography nom, because now that I've seen it, if it didn't get that nomination, I would have had a fit. This inky black and white cinematography makes the film what it is. It creates this lifeless yet weirdly quirky tone that sells the idea. It falls apart a bit when it takes a turn down some roads I was just not at all interested in, which is a bummer because I really enjoyed watching this, but I really haven't thought about it a ton since seeing it just because of how underwhelming the outcome ended up being. But I still walked away enjoying and admiring the originality of it all. The Eternal Memory is up for Best Documentary Feature, and it's the story of a married couple and what happens when one of them gets Alzheimer's. It's a painfully raw and up-close look at the disease, one that doesn't cut away when it gets difficult, it only zooms in closer. But it never feels overly depressing. In fact, it feels more like a tribute to the love that never left. That deep down, that connection is still there. It's a film about sacrifice and learning to let go, knowing when to step back. And for those reasons, I really enjoyed this, even if I wish there was a little bit more to it than what we got. American Symphony is up for Best Original Song, and I'm surprised it isn't up for Best Documentary. It follows John Baptiste as he writes a song for his wife after learning that her cancer is back. And it's hard not to feel wrapped up in this doc. Not only do you feel the love between the two main subjects every step of the way, but the situation itself is so uniquely intense. Also, it not only happens to be beautifully shot, but the music John Baptiste makes in this is really nice. The film chooses to focus more on the artistic process and the role that creation has on all this, which was interesting, but I wish it focused more on the actual people. By the end, it still felt like there was a lot that I didn't know, which is fine, but a deeper look would have made this hit even harder than it did. Bobi Wine, the People's President, is also up for Best Documentary Feature, and it tells the story of Bobi Wine, an extremely popular artist from Uganda who runs for president and the troubles his campaign faces. While undoubtedly the safest of the documentary nominees this year, I was still very invested in this. Yeah, it's a bit conventional at times, sure it's a little corny at times, but where Bobi Wine succeeds is in its display of how a revolution comes to be. There's something really inspiring and infuriating about watching the process of that, seeing how one person can influence so many people, and watching how the government responds to that influence. It's an inside look at a movement that, again, I was pretty invested in, even if it was like the safest thing I've ever seen. Our Uniform is up for Best Animated Short, and I think this might be my favorite animation style out of all the shorts this year. It is so fun to look at. It's so interesting and creative. Every shot has its own quirk. It looks at the world in such a fun and unique way. I could have watched this for like 20 minutes, just different little ideas done in this animation style, which is why I was extremely bummed when, as soon as I thought the short was starting, it cut to the credits. I think this is way too short for what it is. I wish there was a bit more bite to its story, but loved the art style. Please, more of this. The final Best Picture nominee on this list, Maestro, is up for Best Picture, Actor, Actress, Cinematography, and Makeup. It's Bradley Cooper's second directorial effort, and it tells the story of Leonard Bernstein and his complicated relationship with his wife Felicia. And as close as I was for picking it for Best Makeup, it just doesn't make the cut for any awards. I respect Maestro, or you know what, scratch that, I respect Bradley Cooper. He makes bold choices and clearly aims to make films that linger with you. He succeeded with A Star Is Born, and I've come to the decision that it's one of my favorite films from the last few years, and I just haven't gotten there with Maestro yet, and I don't think I'll ever get there. But I like what he does here. I like the tragedy of the film's back half. I say this with love and concern, but Cooper clearly understands a specific type of troubledness and misery that public figures face, and he's explored that feeling in both his films now, which is a part of Maestro I really enjoyed. There's some real grit in there, but he can't seem to get it all the way out because he's too preoccupied trying to make something Oscar-y. The cinematography here is beautiful, but it's a little expected and sometimes empty. There's a certain try-hard feel to the direction that's hard to ignore and pretend isn't there. The performance is over the top at times and sometimes a little annoying. The screenplay is unfocused and for a large chunk of the film uninteresting, but at the same time there's something about the cut of the film, when you step back and look at it, that's sort of interesting to me. It's clunky in a way only a truly honest piece of work can be, like he threw his whole heart into this, which is why personally it's going to go down as one of the most frustrating films of the awards season this year. It's something I love in theory, that I deeply admire, but that doesn't actually work all that well. But I will say it is loads more interesting than a lot of what's on here. The Barber of Little Rock is up for Best Documentary Short Film, and it's about a Little Rock barber named Arlo Washington who starts a community bank to help solve the racial wealth gap. This is a topic I truly don't know nearly enough about, and I found it really fascinating. Not only is Arlo Washington a super charismatic subject, but to see this kind of impact at such a small scale was undeniably inspiring. Letter to a Pig is up for Best Animated Short, and for the first 5 or so minutes, I thought this would be an easy winner for me. The minimalist animation style, blending live action footage of hands and eyes to express humanity seeping its way through, was simply sick as fuck. But the style starts to feel a little less exciting the deeper into the short you get, and the more abstract stuff with the pig in the back half, it was cool, but it didn't really stick with me. Nimona is up for Best Animated Feature, and while I appreciated the art style and themes at play, I can't sit here and lie like this was one of my favorites. Glad to see this one get nominated over, like, Wish, that's for sure. But yeah, this has an aesthetic and sense of humor that is not really my thing. I found the main characters super annoying and hard to care about. I found the story a little predictable, but still, like Barbie, I would imagine this resonated pretty hard with a lot of younger viewers, and for that, I can't give it too much shit. The Color Purple is up for Best Supporting Actress, and is that it? Whew, Jesus. A few months ago, I saw this as one of the biggest awards movies of the season, one that would probably rake in a handful of technicals. I feel like musicals that come out around this time of the year typically perform pretty well at the awards, but I guess this one didn't. And I can sort of see why. The film is pretty underwhelming, but I also think it could have had a little bit more love. No, I guess I do group this one in with Napoleon, where next to the rest of what's up this year, it does seem pretty boring and like it's just not doing enough to get people's attention. I also think I like Napoleon a lot because I saw it on a big ass screen, and I'd imagine this would be the kind of thing to hit harder in theaters too. I missed it and had to watch it at home, which I don't think was the intended place. But I'm frustrated by this mostly because the people attached to it are so damn talented. I mean, you got Fantasia Barrino delivering one of the most passionate performances I saw this year, Danielle Brooks bringing some much needed energy to nearly every scene she's in, Coleman Domingo being evil for once. It's just a shame that the musical numbers are bland as hell and the entire production feels uninspired and lazy. All that said though, yeah, it still made me cry. Society of the Snow is up for Best Makeup and Best International Feature, and you know what? I'm giving it Best Makeup. Sure, the makeup on Willem Dafoe and Poor Things is a work of art in itself, but I think the makeup here is undeniably insane. I was using Burt's Bees the entire time even though I did not need it. That's saying something. It is without a doubt the highlight of the film for me. While this list doesn't seem that controversial so far, this might be the one where you guys turn on me. I did not love Society of the Snow. I was way more bored by this than I expected to be. I'm thrilled to see it rake in the nominations that it received. I think it deserves all the technical love, but I found the pace of the film to be terribly one-noted. Every scene is delivered with equal amounts of intensity, which understandably, but when you do that, it really nullifies the intensity of the entire thing. If everything's intense, then nothing is. I struggle to feel very invested, which is a shame for such a fascinating story. But again, technically speaking, it is great and certainly well made. Every time I see a scene from this out of context or a still pops up on my timeline, it always fools me into thinking it was a much better movie than it was. Pachyderme is nominated for Best Animated Short, and of the nominated shorts this year, I feel the most cold about this one. I still don't think it's the worst one, as I find the animation style to be really nice to look at. It's a sort of storybook style that was simple but very unique. The subject of the film is very intense and pretty devastating, but I thought the way it told it was just a little too dreary. I was frustrated at just how unengaging this was, but maybe that is just me. Island in Between is up for Best Documentary Short, and damn, I really have close to nothing to say about this one. This is about the islands of Kinmen, which are located in between Taiwan and mainland China, and while this did scratch a geography itch where I got to learn about a unique place I had no idea existed, I didn't feel like I walked away knowing that much. Honestly, it felt a bit like a trailer for a really interesting movie, but instead this was the film. War is Over is up for Best Animated Short, and it's totally gonna win. I say that because I guess besides Tim Blake Nelson in 95 Senses, this is the short with the most star power behind it, being produced by Yoko Ono's company, using one of Lennon's most beloved songs. When it comes time to vote, people who haven't seen any of the shorts or did and are easily swayed by familiarity are just automatically gonna go with this one. That's just how it works most of the time. And the short itself is certainly not bad at all. It's no boy, horse, fox, mole, whatever. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm livid over this thing. Yeah, its anti-war messaging is absurdly surface level. The comparisons to that one Kendall Jenner Pepsi commercial are hilariously accurate. The animation is just different enough to save this from being a complete bore. It's certainly my last pick of the nominees and is not a short I'll ever think about again after I upload this video, but it could be a lot worse. NYAD is up for Best Actress and Supporting Actress, and somehow not Best Makeup. Honestly, I would not have nominated these two actresses, but I would have nominated it for makeup. I think that's a little weird. And it tells the, I think, true story of Diana Nyad, the first person ever to swim from Cuba to Florida. As a swimmer myself, this was a highly anticipated film for me. I'm one of the only people I know who was actively trying to see this all the way back at TIFF, because anyone who has spent too many hours looking at the bottom of a pool knows that swimmers gotta stick together out there, and I was excited to see the sport on the big screen. I even did my first open water swim just weeks before seeing this, so it was very relevant, and I was just so curious. I also really loved the previous work from the filmmakers. It just seemed up my alley, and I was so severely disappointed by how cheesy and honestly boring this was, and I was ready to excuse the cheesiness. I expected that, but it was even worse than I thought it'd be. The main message you walk away with is never give up. Like, are we 6? Once the swim itself really takes over, it's hard not to feel into it. I have to give it to the filmmakers for making it feel so real and stressful, but the surface level never give up messaging just felt so phoned in to me. Annette Bening, I can't be too surprised that she was nominated here. She gives such a goofy performance. Of course they ate it up. I really wish it was Fantasia Barrino instead. I do apologize to the NYAD fanbase for this one. It's just not my thing. Rustin is up for Best Actor, and it tells the story of Bayard Rustin, the advisor to Martin Luther King Jr. in his battles against homophobia, as he at the same time made serious strides fighting for equality. It's just slightly worse than NYAD, but is on the same level of Oscar baitiness. The thing about NYAD though is I think there's a little bit more going for it. Rustin feels like its entire purpose was just to get Colman Domingo nominated. I just thought this was incredibly surface level and safe filmmaking that does close to nothing remarkable, except for Colman Domingo, who is undeniably fantastic in the titular role of Rustin. He really lives in this role for the entire duration, and unlike Annette Bening, isn't overperforming at any point. I do think he deserves the nomination, I can't be too mad at that, but the film itself, truly a snooze fest. The one thing NYAD has over this is it has moments that are pretty entertaining, even if they're a bad kind of entertaining. This is just boring, unfortunately. Again, it's never offensively bad at any point, but it might be the most forgettable movie on this list. Elemental is up for Best Animated Feature, and to absolutely nobody's surprise, it's probably my last pick of those nominees. Listen, I don't hate Elemental. In fact, like I mentioned in my review for it a while back, the animation that Pixar is playing around with is pretty interesting, and the world building is some of their best. If only we could experience a little bit more of that, and a little bit less of this corny and forgettable romance story. Elemental has not aged well with me. I've grown to really dislike this film the more I think about it. Why is this art style being wasted on such blobby character designs? It's so forgettable for Pixar. Like, I used to say that the film isn't horrible, it's just lackluster for Pixar. I say that anytime I see a bad Pixar movie. I'm like, well, this isn't that bad of a movie, it's just bad for Pixar. But when you look at the rest of the nominees here, the rest of the animation world has caught up to Pixar. Some have even passed it. Pixar used to be all about being ahead of the curve, pushing the boundaries of creativity and animation, and Elemental is unfortunately a pretty big example of them being severely behind the curve, and for that, it's pretty low on the list. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is somehow up for Best Score. It's a new Indiana Jones movie about Dr. Jones tracking down a dial. While there are certainly worse films on this list, I do get weirdly pissed off every time I think about Dial of Destiny. That a character as beloved as Indiana Jones somehow ended up in a muddy CGI 2023 Disney film. Oh my god, it's so depressing. Even Crystal Skull had a sense of real adventure. This barely counts as an Indiana Jones movie if I'm being honest. I don't know. I think it saves itself near the end with a ridiculous action scene that was so absurd it kind of worked. And praying that this is the last Indiana Jones movie, the final scene is a sweet note to end on. It felt very conclusive. But hey, so did him and his dad literally riding horses into the sunset after accepting mortality in a cave. That was also pretty damn conclusive. In my head, this movie never happened. I refuse to acknowledge this movie after I upload this video. I hate this movie. The ABCs of Book Banning is up for Best Documentary Short, and it's about book banning and the greater effect it has on children and the education system. The thing about this film is, I don't disagree with the messaging at all, that book banning is dangerous, of course, and the kinds of books being banned are important, obviously, and I love that the film focuses on the younger generation and interviews them and gets their thoughts on it. This is all great, but guys, this film is a PowerPoint presentation. It's just like 12 minutes of book covers and then an X over them. And most of the time it's like low res JPEGs. It's like, what am I watching? There are some cool elements here, don't get me wrong, but was there no effort put into this? All that said, I think it's gonna win the award. And that is gonna be the craziest. Again, I'm not gonna pretend to be super upset about it because again, I do like the messaging here. But similar to some other shorts that are lower on this list, I'm baffled at how this got nominated. I feel like someone slid some money under the table. Golda is up for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, and it tells the story of Golda Meir, the former Prime Prime Minister of Israel and recounts the tense 19 days of the Yom Kippur War. This is a tricky film that, to be honest, I wanted to avoid at all costs. With everything going on in the world, is this really the film I need to see right now? No. In fact, if you want to hear a little bit more about why this film isn't really something I wanted to see to begin with, you should check out this video about the movie by NYAD International, which in my opinion sums it up perfectly. But when I look at the film itself, I see it as an attempt to better understand this person, sort of an Oppenheimer style approach to the biopic, putting you in her head. I don't want to be put in that head to begin with, but as far as whether or not it succeeds in doing that, I would say no, not at all. But I can see that it's trying, and that's something. It's well shot and for the most part well acted. If we're talking makeup, they do a good job in completely hiding Helen Mirren here. In the same way Rustin only really exists to get Colman Domingo an acting nomination, this only exists to get a makeup nomination. To be honest, any attempt this had at creating tension or providing insight was lost on just how boring it was. If it is propaganda, it's shitty propaganda. The film is terribly dull, and I'll say it one of the biggest chores to get through on this list. In my opinion, it is not worth your time. Nominated for Best Live Action Short is The After, and the short tells the story of a grieving rideshare driver. Listen, man, I hate to shit on a short film when it comes to stuff like this, especially shorts that, as far as I know, are not backed by any big names besides its lead. But that said, I'm fascinated by how this got nominated. It's a hot mess. Not only is its exploration of grief incredibly surface level, but it's also downright silly. It's such a first draft of a film. The idea is there, but they don't go anywhere with it. They just have this man collapse on the floor and weep. This is kind of mean, but the script here is on the same level as shit I was watching in my freshman year film classes. That's not good. I like David Oyelowo. I think he's a good actor, but I think it's filmed in a way that does not do him any favors. The only thing keeping this from being at the bottom is not only does putting a short at the bottom of the list feel wrong, but I also can see how this film would come from a real place. Clearly, someone had some experience with grief that inspired this short, which is why I don't want to make fun of it too much. I believe it came from a real place, but you gotta translate that to the audience somehow. You gotta communicate that in an interesting way, and I don't think this does any of that. There's only one film on this list that feels like it didn't come from a real place, that feels like it's not a real film at all, and it's Flamin Hot. Flamin Hot is up for Best Original Song, and it's my least favorite Oscar-nominated film of the year. The film tells the quote-unquote true story of Richard Montañez, the creator of the Flamin Hot Cheeto, and how this snack came to be. The general vibe I've seen with people who also watched this movie, which I have to say is a tightly knit bunch, is that you go into it with low expectations, and then come out of it thinking it was a relatively inoffensive and well-made film. And sure, the cinematography doesn't look terrible, it surely looks professional. I wouldn't call the performances here terrible, but they aren't good. But really, when I look at the rest of the films on this list, this is the only one that truly feels like a fake movie. I saw the film, I watched Flamin' Hot, but I still don't believe it exists. I can't picture this being filmed over multiple weeks. I can't see actors and crew showing up to film this. It seems like a long joke. It's extremely corny. It tries to appeal to everyone in the world, which is I hate that. Take a risk here. Do something interesting. Any interesting choice it makes is like a shitty reference to some other classic film, but done in this like family-friendly, G-rated, accessible way. It's the kind of thing you're forced to sit through in like elementary school, yet there isn't really that much to take away from this other than a better understanding of how these factories are run. I don't even see the rags to riches aspect of this being all that inspiring. Not only does it feel like a series of miracles, but apparently most of it isn't even true. I thought this was cheesy and disingenuous, and that's enough to put it at the bottom for me. It was a waste of time. And there you have it, my rank for every Oscar-nominated film of 2024. This is my final ballot if you want to pause and take it all in. On a positive note, I discovered so many films I admittedly would never have checked out if not for this challenge, which makes you think, for as questionable as a lot of these nominations are, I'm grateful for the Oscars, and that there is an award show that recognizes even the tiniest of shorts. I walked away from this really excited to check out more from these filmmakers, and that said, I'll definitely be doing it again next year. Thanks for watching. Go watch all of these films and form your own opinions, and I'll see you in the next one.